Welcome everybody to A Real Point of View. I am your host, Greg Morgan, and I'm the Real Movie Guy. You can check me out on Twitter with some interesting comments on films that are out there in the uh, trending motif. Joining me today are two film critics, internet film critics. We have Karen D, who is the movie maven, and we have Mr. Stephen C, who is a guy who doesn't pick bad films. Um, I'm sorry, what'd you say, Karen?
Allegedly.
Well, there you go. There you have
I have not missed that.
it.
But
well,
I did.
well, we've had a slight hiatus, ladies and gentlemen, and I see that Karen and Steve are, they're feeling the emotions of separation, and
It was horrible.
it was horrible, huh? I'll look that up later. Um, but yeah, so now we're back together again. The three amigos, three musketeers, three of the heart. We can come up with a bunch of different threes.
The
Um,
big three.
the big there you go. See, Steve's come up with one.
The little
Um,
trio.
the trio, the
Ain't
trio.
nothing about me is little. Let's be honest. I am. Whew, this summer is doing me no favors.
And this summer's just getting started.
I
No,
know.
we work a hard job, and yet somehow the weight still stays there. Somehow, I guess it's the girth to pick up all the strong things that
I,
we have. No, that's probably not have nothing to do with it.
I'm beginning to think I'm just a bear.
Okay, well there you go. Know that if they do a B movie, you can be an extra because bears are really popular in period pieces. I've noticed. Asked Leonardo DiCaprio, or almost decapitated. Um, in what's the name of that movie?
Revenant.
The bear.
No, what was it?
Revenant.
Revenant. Yeah, like they could
That's
do a
right.
like they
I
could
was
do a
rooting
name
for
that
the
was even
bear.
a name that was even easier to pronounce. Like the bear.
Well, there actually
Or
was a movie called The Bear, I think starring Anthony Hopkins.
okay, then the bear attacks. Oh, I got one. Grisly circumstance. That might have been a good title.
Whoa, look at the time.
I'm actually not. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds really good. But back to subjects at hand.
Yes,
What is
indeed.
our subject at hand, Mr. Greg?
Well, you know what? With the essence of the subject and then really the idea came from um, the man who doesn't pick a bad film. How about you, Steve? Tell us what our subject is, and then we'll go from there.
One thing Hollywood's been trying to do recently is capitalize on the popularity of video games on the youth. Ready Player One coming out and just covering all sorts of genres in this open world. Rampage with The Rock. And then more and more, we're starting to see Tomb Raider just recently came to DVD of these people that are trying to adapt these characters that are becoming so mainstream and have been mainstream for a while into modern Hollywood. And with the updating of graphics and design and things like that, they're trying to bring them to the big screen to capitalize on what used to be the little guy, gamers and cartoon fans and stuff like that. So we're just covering movies based on video games, which is a very hard genre to find great movies in right now because people try to go so crazy with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think just like comic books into film, we see that trend being experienced more and more of late. And so I think, obviously, as you alluded to, Steve, with all those things being a factor, there's going to be more and more films, and more films that are going to be a little bit more. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Having a little bit more focus, better screenwriting, a lot more money being um, devoted to establishing better films off these video game ideas and video game uh, um, essence that have been, as you said, mainstays in the video realm for a number of years. So yeah, and that that's kind of cool. I found a few of those films to be pretty interesting out there. I think one of the more popular ones is that people know about is Doom, and that's stars The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. But you know, there's some other really cool films out there that people may or may not know that much about in general. And since we're delving into the situation where we're merging two quote unquote worlds, the video game world and the movie world, you're going to have a lot of people out there that don't know about the video games that much necessarily because they're not in that genre. Now, I know, Steve, you're in that genre quite a bit. I'm in that genre a little bit. And Karen is a little bit more of a novice when it comes to that kind of thing.
I'm
But
not in the genre at all.
well, see, there you go.
We gave you a handout, and you just had to just slap it away.
Well, no, that's okay. It's what people who rant do. But in this case, let's start with you, Karen. Here's a situation. It's not a genre that you're that familiar with, and yet you were able to find a film that you were able to look at. So maybe I have a question too, in that the movie that you decided to pick, which you'll, of course, express to us momentarily. I just did that for fun. See what you guys are saying.
I'm like, did he freeze? Did he?
I was like, great, Greg just broke
That
down.
was actually kind of fun for a moment. Okay, so
Is he hyperventilating? Is he suffocating? I don't know. I was like, the possibilities were just enormous.
yeah, it was just see if I could do it. Okay, anyway, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I was just playing around. But in all seriousness, since it's not
That'll be a
a genre that
first.
you're really familiar with, Karen, why don't you give us your take on the movie that you picked, and did you actually enjoy it?
Okay, well, the movie I picked is Need for Speed. It's a 2010 movie. I believe it was made in I'm sorry, not 2010, 2014. It's made in 2014. It's kind of a long movie. It's over 2 hours, almost 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it stars people who aren't in terribly well known in terms of the film industry. I mean, I think they're known within the industry, but not terribly well known to the film going public. It stars Aaron Paul. He plays Toby Marshall, the hero of the film. Dominic Cooper plays the main opponent in the film. Dino Brewster. Imogen Poote is the love interest. Imogen Poote is the love interest. Kid Cudi or Kid Cudi, I'm not sure how
Kid Cudi.
he must be a rapper. Did you say Kid Cudi?
It is Kid
Yeah.
Cudi.
Yeah, he plays one of the like gang friends. Rami Malek is in this film from the television series I, Robot.
Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot, not iRobot. Mr. Robot. But he has a interesting part in this film, and Dakota Johnson's also in this film. So Scott Waugh directed it. I think Steven Spielberg had something to do, like in the background, with helping to get this picture made. And it was written by George Gattens and others. So why I picked this film was because just reading about the selection of films, I sort of went to Google to see, well, what kind of films have been made from video games? And I mean, I have to be honest, most of them didn't sound terribly good. They're not the films that I would go out of my way to see. I sort of landed on Need for Speed just because it's about cars and racing, and that it just, to me, is a little bit more interesting than the typical first-person shooter type game. And I thought, well, maybe and also, well, I forgot about one of the main people who's in this movie, Michael Keaton. So I thought, well, Michael Keaton's in this movie, so he doesn't normally land in clunkers. There has to be a reason this man is in this movie. Lord knows he doesn't need the money, as far as I know. So I thought, let me see this film. And watching this film, I have to say, the first hour, I didn't care. about what was going on with this movie. There's a lot of exposition, in my opinion, too much exposition. And too much of the setting up of the rivalry between Toby Marshall and Dino Brewster, and sort of too much of like making out of sort of like these friends who basically kind of skew as a gang, as far as I can tell. Too much of that. The movie got really interesting to me. It really caught my attention about halfway through, when there's this incredible police chase. And Aaron Paul's driving the silver Mustang, and the whole point of the movie is that Aaron Paul, who plays Toby Marshall, Toby has just gotten out of prison. He was framed for a crime he didn't commit, which had to do with the death of one of his friends. And the rival, Dino Brewster, is this wealthy, young man who has a, big thing for cars. And it was actually Dino Brewster who was involved with the friend's death. And he was involved in that the friend got into an accident. They were all racers. The friend got into an accident, and Dino Brewster left him to die. But Toby Marshall gets framed for that murder. So when he gets out of prison, he's struggling financially. He does a custom car business, rebuilds custom cars and stuff like that. And he's trying to find a way to get some traction and some financial security. And he decides to enter this really exclusive underground race called the De Leon. So that's kind of the setup for the movie, and then it kind of just takes off from there. But like I said, a lot of exposition that I just didn't care about until about halfway through the film. Toby Marshall decides that he's going to enter this race, and he's like trying to make sure that the silver Mustang will stand up to it. Meanwhile, Dino Brewster is racing some sort of Maserati or something, and really just has it in for Toby Marshall. And at one point he says something like, "Well, listen, any of you who I don't want Toby Marshall in this race. He doesn't belong in this race. And if any of you out there listening to me, because this is all being blasted all over like on the dark web, basically." And he's like, if any of you can like find Toby and just make sure he doesn't get to the De Leon, you can have my Maserati, which is like a $4 million car. So people are just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And we've got to find Toby Marshall. So basically putting a target on his back. Meanwhile, Michael Keaton is sort of, doing this sort of play-by-play on his, dark web internet radio station. And somebody early on in the movie says, well, who are you? And why are you even talking about this? And why should we listen to you? And Michael Keaton's like, I'm the one who put the De Leon together. I'm the one who decides who stays in the race and who gets to be in the race. And if I don't bless you, then you can't get anywhere near this race, and yada, yada, yada. So there you go. Here's what I liked about this movie. The movie really gelled, like I said, like halfway through with that chase that basically began with Toby Marshall trying to get to the De Leon, and he basically had to drive across the country to do it. And he's driving like crazy and breaking all kinds of rules and laws and stuff like that because he has this target on his back. And so the police are after him, and then just random people are after him because they want the $4 million Maserati. And just the way in which these car stunts were staged, to me, was just stunning. It was just amazing. The production team used like shells of cars. And from what I've been reading about the movie, there were a number of mistakes made in how some cars were called out in terms of, the specific models and things like that. But when you're watching a movie, unless you're really, 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 really into cars, you don't care about that. The cars are fast. They are absolutely gorgeous. You know, I mean, there are Bugattis in the car. There's some other like bizarro exotic cars that I've never heard of that probably cost, hundreds and hundreds of thousands or probably millions of dollars. But they all, they show up in this movie, and the way in which the action scenes with the cars were filmed, I thought was really, really well done. The way in which they had the cameras positioned when Toby Marshall, the hero, was trying to get away from the cops, and these crash sequences when the cars he's dodging cops and the cops can't pivot because they're only driving cop cars. The cops can't pivot and they end up totaling out, or some of his rivals are trying to pivot and they total out, or they don't total out, and whatever. The other thing I really liked about this movie is when it really gelled and it became apparent that it was Toby Marshall versus Dino Brewster and it was going to be mano a mano, it just came off to me like the classic Ben-Hur scene between Charlton Heston and Stephen Boyd when they were racing with chariots. It's exactly how it read to me. And in fact, there was one point in the movie when they're in the De Leon at this point, which supposedly takes place in California, although I'm quite sure it wasn't filmed there. But anyway, it takes place in California, and there they are driving, doing the whole eye to eye thing, and I said to the movie, I know in the next second, Dino Brewster is going to veer his car just like Stephen Boyd did to Charlton Heston and Ben-Hur. He's going to veer his car into Toby Marshall's car to just like take him out. And that's exactly what he did. I'm like, it's Ben-Hur. That's exactly what. Secretly, he's in love with Toby Marshall. That's why he can't handle what's going on. So I said, because I think Stephen Boyd was really in love with Charlton Heston's character, with Judah Ben. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, it was really interesting movie. The other thing I will say as I move off of this movie is that although Michael Keaton's in the movie and he's a really great actor, I have no idea what the man was doing in that movie. That was a completely unnecessary role as far as I'm concerned, his sort of narrating the race. And it was just so peripheral to anything that was actually going on in the movie. And they tried to make it substantive and it just wasn't. The other thing I didn't like was the love story because it's totally cheap, totally unoriginal. Who cares? You just care about the cars. That's why you watch this movie, and you care about how fast they go. That's the other reason you watch this movie. Everything else is just, so much fluff.
So did you feel that it was giving you kind of that video game effect feel that, if you actually were sitting there at a control, this is how you would kind of be racing the cars against each other?
I think, yeah, it did. The movie was really good at generating that. And like I said, the film, the action sequences were shot so well. You really did kind of feel like you were in the middle of this horrendous roller coaster ride. I mean, there's this one scene where Kid Cudi is a helicopter. He's a pilot, and he has to like catch up with Toby Marshall's car, and he's using the helicopter to do it, to get him away from one of the rivals. And they basically loop these huge chains under the car windows and lift the car up and fly it over the water. It was like, wow, that is so cool. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it definitely gave you a video game feeling.
Cool. So what about you, Steve? What were the movies that you were able to look at, and go ahead and tell us what you got.
I just want to say, Karen, it was interesting to get your take, not being like really a video game person, to see a video game movie. And Need for Speed is one that closely resembles what the video games are like. There's always an alternate story to the racer that you are. So even though the fluff and stuff may have not felt necessary in the film, especially when you are like you said, paying attention to the beauty of the cars, the speeds that they're going, the turns, and all the crazy stuff that's going on. It just kind of has you build with the character as you're playing the game, and that was really the reason for that. I can see your point where it definitely wasn't necessary, but it's just kind of that build of you need some tension somewhere. Let's put it there.
That makes sense.
Then the racing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The movie I want to talk about is The Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. That was a thing. Sorry. The Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. It's based on 2 Prince of Persia video games, one called The Warrior Within, the other one called The Two Thrones. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Ben Kingsley, Gemma Arden, and Alfred Molina. So they came at this movie with a cast, and it's the producers of the Pirates of the Caribbean. So they were just like, what's the problem? It's not a problem. We're just going to throw money at it, which is what they did. And they put together, in my opinion, a really good movie. They did set a high budget, but they surpassed it in the box office twofold. The movie starts out with Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Dastan, who is a Persian, basically beggar. He's just a child. He shows a little courage in front of King Shahriman, who's taking over the town that he's in. And the king ends up seeing like the grit that he has, so he takes him in. Then the movie transfers to like years later, where Shahriman is sending his sons, Dastan being one that he's adopted, and Tuss and Gressif, to capture a holy city called Alamut, because they are selling weapons to Persian enemies. So they go, they capture the city. Dastan and the two other brothers lead the charge. He opens the gate. The Persians come in. They take the city. No problems. But during one of the fights with the royal guards, Dastan ends up securing a special-looking dagger. It's really interesting, and it has a little glass hilt at the end with what looks like sand in it. Also, when the city falls, they end up meeting Princess Tamina, which is played by Gemma, and she's reluctant to do anything. She's reluctant to help or adhere to demands of the Persians until she sees Dastan has the dagger. And then all of a sudden her entire script flips. And one of the brothers says, in order to unite our 2 nations to keep from us continuing this war and this path, marry me. And then we can stop it. And everything will be fine. So she says yes. Well, ends up, they go to the ceremony. The king is being presented with gifts for his conquest of the city. The brothers are meeting with people, and this is where you really get to meet Ben Kingsley's character, Nazim. I'm sorry. And he ends up finding a robe for Tuss, one of the brothers, who ends up giving it to Dastan to, hey, take this and present this as your gift to our father. So Dastan presents it to him, and the king puts it on, and he loves it. But all of a sudden, he starts to smoke. He starts to shake, and he gets burns over his body. And it turns out that the robe was poisoned. So Dastan is being labeled a murderer. He killed the king. So now everybody immediately, we knew he was just a street rat. We knew he was just a nobody. We knew he'd turn his back at some point. So they all go after him, all these people that he's grown to love and grown up with. So he ends up taking the princess with him as a hostage, if he needs to get out of any situation. So they travel across the deserts. The brothers end up appointing a bounty on Dastan's head, which people throughout the movie are coming to collect, including a group of covert warriors from Persian lore called the Hassan, which are basically guys that literally lived on a mountaintop and trained to be nothing but assassins their whole life. and that the only time they would come down is to assassinate people, and then they would head back to their home. And so even those people, well, at one point they finally settle down for Dastan and Tamina settle down for camp, and Tamina takes this opportunity to try to take the dagger. Dastan wakes up, discovers the dagger, they're wrestling over it, and then finally he activates it. Well, when he activates the dagger, he actually reverses time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the true sands of time of the dagger starts to come into play. And he reverses time to before she grabbed the dagger. He wakes up, he grabs the dagger, and he's like, what just happened? And then she realizes what's going on. He tries to just he's looking down. You used all the sand in the dagger. So he's looking down. He's like, all right, we're in a desert. I'll just put more sand in the dagger. No, you moron. It takes special sand to activate the dagger. So, of course, it does take special sand. And that's where you got to go through 20 dungeons and defeat 30 bosses. And welcome to video games, ladies and gentlemen. So they end up, finally, he ends up getting back to his uncle, Nazim, who's helped him as he was a baby, who was the brother of King Saruman. And he realizes that's who betrayed everything. And then it all starts coming together and getting exploited and things like that. They try to set up a trap. Of course, it doesn't work, but it ends up getting one of the brothers killed, one of the people that he's loved and that he's trying to help fix this. So they end up doing the planning, and they come up with the idea of, we're going to put the dagger back. We're going to stop Nazim. We're going to get everything we can back. But the sand on the dagger itself only holds enough sand to reverse 1 minute. So, hey, why don't we go get all of the sand? And this is where the movie slowly starts to reach its climax. And without going into too much detail, you really start to see the video game aspect truly coming into this part, where you've seen a variable Indiana Jones or Aladdin style movie up to this point, with him running around, dipping guards, getting out of situations, weapon or sword play and stuff like that. But then you get to the point where it's the crazy jumps, the sliding down pillars and jumping off at the last second to land on a ledge where you literally only get a pinky on and pull yourself up and things like that. And they do a great job capturing everything. Gyllenhaal, Gemma, everyone does an amazing job with putting their outside reactions to the emotions and the things that are going on. And of course, every movie has to have a happy ending these days. I'm really getting sick of it, not to be honest. Well, spoiler alert, except for Marvel.
Send your complaints to Steve. I can't pick a bad movie.
Right. Hey, if you haven't seen it yet, something's wrong with you. But this movie is really good. I suggest everybody go see it. Karen, I really feel like you would actually enjoy this movie.
Yeah, it was my second pick. I probably, if I couldn't have found a way to see Need for Speed, I would have watched Prince of Persia.
It is definitely worth the watch, and it does have that Indiana Jones, Aladdin style feel with just that little bit extra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen the movie too, and it's actually pretty good. One of those movies that I think is viable out there for people if they really want to enjoy a night out there at the movies, or sit at home and watch the movie with some popcorn. It's one of those it's a very interesting movie. And then, of course, as you said, Steve, once it starts at climax, then it becomes interesting and kind of crazy. So it's kind of one of my favorite of this kind of genre of films. So, speaking of this genre of films, it's funny. I got into video games quite by accident. seeing other people around me getting into these new consoles that were coming out. I have a brother, a younger brother, who is really heavy into video games, and he's very eclectic. So there's so many different types of systems, and so he's pretty much has an affinity for all these different systems and games, and playing all these games. I remember he came out to visit us when we were out in Arizona, and he brought his video games with him. So kind of really into that kind of thing. Now for me, my wife and I decided after a while to get a Xbox, and so that was my introduction into video games. And one of the first games that I got really wasn't something I bought; it was something I rented. I went to the video store, which just started carrying a lot of video games, and I picked up this one. Looked kind of interesting because of what the cover looked like, which I guess a lot of people do when they're trying to find different things. So it was interesting cover, so I started reading the back, and I thought, hey, this might be a something. So the movie and the video game that I picked up was Hitman, and this is actually a pretty decent movie. Um, an actor who is starting to become one of my favorite actors is Timothy Oliphant, and he plays the main character in Hitman. He plays Agent 47, and he basically, to not give a whole bunch away, but he's uh, from childhood up into adulthood, he's been programmed and taught and trained to be um, an expert assassin, hitman, as the movie suggests. And through whatever this organization is, the company that he works for, he is sent out to do this dastardly deed. And um, these quote unquote hitmen go out there and they show very little emotion. They're pretty much on task. Um, and what's interesting about his character, he kind of breaks that motif and shows this much emotion, which is too much more emotion than everybody else from his same organization is from. And that's just enough for him to actually be inundated into the regular world as a slightly human being essence, when that's not what they were trained to be. They were trained to be very efficient, very um, horrific killing machines, get the job done, come back to base. And this doesn't happen in this movie. He kind of takes a turn.
The
He shows
hitman
he
with a
has
heart.
a heart. Well, a part of a heart. And
The
yes, it
soup
might be
son of heart.
slightly smaller than that, Steve, but yes. Um,
He doesn't immediately kill the girl once he gets annoyed.
yes.
That's how big his heart is.
Yes, because
Okay.
here's the thing.
Wow.
It's something about this girl that intrigues him. And he realizes
What a surprise.
at some point that maybe things aren't like he's been taught. Maybe things aren't so one-sided, so cut and dry, so black and white. And we can keep on with the analogies. Um, and that's what I really like about this film. He shows a human side. But see, the thing about this movie is, and even after playing the game, and this is one of those situations where I actually played the game before I saw the movie. But it made me even more that much more intrigued because now, after playing the game, now I see how the game is being played in this film, and I'm watching it, and I'm watching this guy who's almost perfect. He's a perfect killing machine, and he always comes up with an idea when he's cornered. He's in a situation where he has nowhere to go, and yet somehow he finds somewhere to go. And the somewhere to go is really strange and crazy typically, but it's like he has things. You know how they always tell you thinking 10 steps ahead. He's like 700. He's like his number. He's like 47 steps ahead. And it's so interesting to watch this movie develop, and it's even that much more intriguing when you've played the game. And so now, ironically, you go back to the game and you see if you can apply some of the ideology and the thought, and you realize you can't. So, um,
I was going to ask you if you could, like if in the movie the hitman could always figure out a way out of the situation. How do you do that? And like, can you do that in the game? Are there ways to do that in the game?
There are obviously ways to do that in the game. The problem is that, just like anything else, what is it about a film that makes it a film and not reality? The director, the screenplay. So even though the premise of the movie is very similar to the game, it doesn't have the same types of situations. And in the situations of the game, you are also trying to toggle through all the different scenarios that you think can get you past that point. In the movie, the scenarios are only, singular, because the movie has to continue on and you have to keep getting to those levels, where you're trying to figure out what those levels are when you're playing the game. When you're in the movie, the levels are presented to you, and it just makes the movie continue to go. But the way that it's presented is almost as if that was your move, your strategy. That's what you would have done. So it's actually kind of cool. That's one of the reasons why I like this movie. And then Timothy Oliphant plays a wonderful Agent 47 in this movie. Now, this movie has sequels to it. I've only watched a little bit of the sequels. The one sequel, which is I think called Agent 47, and it's interesting. The trailer is actually really really good, and the movie is not quite as interesting as the trailer, but it's still pretty good. But the first film, the one with Timothy Oliphant, the one with Olga Kurylenko, Steve, that name mean anything to you? And
It
then
does.
and then
Saints be praised.
and
Yes.
and a guy who I really like in film, who plays the protagonist, or the evil guy in this one, Dole Gray Scott.
He's not evil.
Oh, I
Not
love Doug
not
Ray
evil.
Scott.
Not evil. Just no, that's right. He's not evil. He's the, what do I want to call him?
He's a Interpol agent.
Right. But see, as far as the
He might be
the
an
main character,
antagonist. Maybe
he
that's the word you're looking for.
yeah, I was gonna say antagonist, protagonist. Is it
No,
protagonist?
antagonist.
Right. He's the antagonist. But the thing is, you like this guy's character. You like him in this movie, and he's just a really good actor, I think. Anyway, but
Love him.
yeah, and so this movie has some decent actors in it. It has good, interesting essence. It has a decent plot. I would advise people to really watch this movie. But as you watch the movie, especially if you're a gamer and you've actually played this game and the different games that they have for Hitman, because there is a series of games, um, you'll find that, yeah, it kind of goes along that line, but there's nothing you can do to make any differences or changes, because again, it's a movie and the director really has their hand into the journey that you're actually going to be on. But it is a wild and crazy journey, and that's why I like it. And you're talking about a guy who, throughout the film, for the most part, doesn't have a whole bunch of expression. And yet, then, because of his realization of the humanity, those expressions start to come out at different points in time. But he's pretty stoic for most of the movie. So, but you know, all the things that happen in the film seem to happen in a very cool way, and so I think it's worth the watch.
Okay.
It's the one thing about the movie is everything seems like a setup, and
Sure.
that's the way the hitman is. The Agent 47. He sees he has a bird's eye view, and he's only looking from ground level. That's just how he is. He's one of those guys that, as he observes, he takes in every little detail, from how you walk, if he's trying to impersonate you, where you're walking, if he's got a direction he needs to go, things that are obstacles in your way that are not obstacles for him, or things that he can make obstacles for you. And it's just, he's playing chess as long as he's awake,
Yeah,
and in every situation.
and it's as I alluded to, it's a really interesting, the Agent 47, because as I said before, it's like he's 47 steps ahead.
Hmm.
He's always ahead, and that's why trying to capture him, trying to stop him, trying to, whatever it is that these different entities are trying to do, from the different essences that are trying to get involved with him, he's always ahead of them, and it drives them crazy. Not him, it's just them. And
But
that's what's really cool about this movie too.
how does he? When does he relax? Just from. I mean, I know this is just a movie and it's based on a video game, but really, I mean, what person
When
could
he,
really live like that? Where
when he
you
sleeps.
you're. When does he sleep? How could he possibly sleep? How can he be 47 steps ahead of somebody if he sleep?
See, the one thing, and this movie does a really good job of giving you this at the very beginning. When you see him first, he is snuck into the Interpol agent's house. And the Interpol agent is coming downstairs going to work. And yet he is in the house. The Interpol agent sees him. There's a body already in a body bag right next to him. And he goes, I need you to sit down. You make a noise. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to go upstairs, kill your wife and kids. And then he tells the guy to sit down, and he goes, this is the guy that did whatever the Interpol agent is looking for. He just points at the body. This is the guy. We're going to have a conversation. At the end of this conversation, it's going to decide whether I shoot you or you get to live. And then he asks him, when do you know it's okay to kill a man? And that's where the presentation of the movie starts to go, from the hotel scene where he literally sets up every possible disadvantage he can have that he has already thought of as he's going into this hotel. And he's been trained for this. Like,
From childhood.
It's weird for people that haven't. I've heard stories, my grandfather being in World War II, and other relatives being in different wars, talking to people going to VFWs and things like that, where when you're trained to do a certain thing and you're trained religiously to do that one thing, to plan out every detail, to be so far ahead that nobody can catch up to you, you don't turn it off ever. And even when you sleep, you're sleeping, you're dreaming, you are not, aware of anything going on in the waking world. You still are having those thoughts. You still are going through those processes. Your brain is moving like that, even though you're asleep. That's why there are those guys that can sleep with one eye open. Or guys that wake up immediately to sounds, or guys that can tell when things happen when they walk into a room and they haven't been in that room in weeks, but they know what moved, they know what changed, they know what shifted, they know what fell. And he's that kind of person. He's been trained to be that kind of person. When he walks into a room, if a pin is laid this way when he leaves and laid this way when he comes back, he knows. And it's just that kind of person that he has been developed into. Right. And it's not so much that he doesn't turn it off. It's just it is always there. It is breathing for him.
Okay.
So that was my movie that Steve even more eloquently added to.
I'm sorry, I love video games. I'm sorry.
That really makes this movie special. It's a especially good movie. So we're running out of time, guys. So why don't we talk about just one movie real quick, and you don't have to go into major detail, that looked like it might be decent as a video game and then maybe decent as a movie, but it didn't quite work. I have one of those films, not saying that you all have to provide one, but I watched Warcraft. I had really high expectations for it, and because I'm into animation and uh, illustration and stuff, so I was currently. I mean, it was a movie that I thought, yeah, it was interesting what you saw, but the storyline and the interest faded really quickly. And this is a movie that has Paula Patton in it, and they made her an orc. And for those of us who watch fantasy films, period piece fantasy films, we know what orc is. And so these orcs are trying to get into another dimension, more or less, because their planet where they live is dying. And so going into this, you've got different warlords and people fighting each other, trying to, be the supreme person and all that stuff. But the movie didn't really do a whole bunch for me. So I couldn't recommend that movie. We get a lot of critics who have seen the film liked it a lot. So I don't know. That didn't transition for me real well. Any other movies that you guys, before we get out of here, that didn't transition well?
I have one that is a cult movie, and it's a cult movie. It's Street Fighter. It's based on the fighting video game called Street Fighter. When Street Fighter 2 came out, it was one thing that they wanted to do is they wanted to promote this with a movie. Um, it did okay at the box office, but it's always come off as a movie that's like that. It's a joke movie. It's a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie who stars as the title character for the movie of Guile, who is one of the fighters in the Street Fighter, who's an American soldier, and people were getting behind that. Plus, it was during a period of time where everybody loved Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie is made so much better by Raul Julia.
Mm-hmm.
He is in this movie, a movie that he has no business lowering himself to the standards of the movie, but he takes the role of M. Bison, who is the leader of this group that is literally trying to take over the world. But what he's trying to do by taking over the world is he wants to, take out big business, to take out, all the problems, all of poverty, all of anything. But he's doing it in a warlord type fashion. So it's just like, wow, you have some really good ideas, but that's not the way to do this. But he also brings his flair to this movie. He takes the role of M. Bison and, oh, this is a joke movie. Why would I see this? As soon as you see him on screen, as soon as you hear him talk, you were just like, this is the greatest character that's ever been made. Like, he does such a phenomenal job, and his acting is so over the top that you really feel like it fits this character, even though the character in the video games is way different. And everything he does and everything he brings about the movie is just like he's being genuine. He's being honest. Everything he says, he believes 100%, and he's doing such a good job with that character. Not to mention, it gives us the best game over, in which he said when he says it, it just radiates off the screen into you, because it's just like, oh well, that's the end of the movie. Like, as soon as you see it, and you look down at the timer, and it was like, this has still got 20 minutes. There's one scene with him and the woman playing Chun-Li where she goes through this whole story about what he did, about how he came into their farm town and his big army with all their guns and their military training were run off by farmers with pitchforks. And yet he comes back and then he kills her dad, in a very unhonorable way. And she goes through this entire story just like pouring herself out. And Raul Julia as Bison returns and says, you look at it as a marked day in which Bison, graced your village. But for me, it was only Tuesday.
Ouch.
So that's the kind of person he is, because he's like, I did it because I had to. I did it because it was what needed to be done. And he's genuine in the way he presents it, but it's just like, you killed her dad. So it's definitely become a cult movie. It's definitely a B movie that if you want to see it, you go see it. But if you ever try to watch the movie, he will blow you away, and you will be like, he deserved way more than this.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Karen. I appreciate you guys hanging out again here on A Real Point of View. And we'll try to come back to you on our YouTube channel with something more about other movies, other trends, other situations.
Go see Jurassic Park.
And
Go see Rampage, maybe. That's based on a video game.
When it comes out on DVD, go see it.
I meant in the movies, but okay.
Well, I think it's out of the theaters now.
Really?
Yeah, they're making room for Skyscraper, which is The Rock's next action movie.
Ah.
Not to mention the Equalizer also comes out soon.
Oh, that's true. Equalizer, what, 12?
2.
Whatever.
With your heinous acting. Your sarcasm. Just sometimes it bothers me.
And yeah, with all
just wait till Equalizer 13 comes out. You'll really have something to complain about.
With the influx of films that are coming out. With the influx of films that are coming out. With the influx. Oh, you guys stopped. I'm sorry.
Oh, I want another Bring It On. I'm gonna be honest.
Bring It On.
They make 12
that's right. Bring It On 53.
No, it's Bring It On, bringing it on the 3rd.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this one, Gabrielle Union is 85, and she's cheering with a walker. Got it.
She could probably do it.
Hey, has anybody seen the Gabrielle Union movie?
I actually have. It was very good.
Oh, it
was very made for TV, but it was very good.
My mother saw it, and I do want to check it out because it just seems so campy.
Right.
You are not wrong. But it was good.
It's like kick burglar butt. Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to take out the trash.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when they're in your house. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for watching us here on a Real Point of View. Check out our YouTube channel for more interesting conversation about film. And as we come up with more, hopefully, great ideas about film, we just want you to know that we're out there working for you, working for us too, but working for you to try to find some of the best films for you to see and try to keep you away from some films that might not be so interesting and a waste of time.
Yes.
So thanks again for joining us. Have a good night, everybody. Peace.
Good night.
Bye-bye.